one of the things that attracted me most to Shakespeare as an actor to play with is he gives you an opportunity to play characters bigger than yourself. And being part of a process of making these very, very important and beautiful and touching and humane works of art come alive for people is obviously something that's very attractive to do. I can't remember the first time I encountered Shakespeare. I do know I grew up in the same house as my grandfather, and he quoted Shakespeare endlessly without me necessarily knowing. I think he quoted lots of different things. And I think in British culture, that's how we encounter Shakespeare. You come across him without knowing it. And then slowly you realize where these things come from. But too often, I think people, even in Britain, feel that Shakespeare is something that belongs to other people, that it belongs to teachers, or it belongs to universities, or it belongs to upper class people, or it belongs to middle class people. It really, really doesn't. Shakespeare belongs to everyone. He was writing for everyone. And there's a reason why Shakespeare's theatre was called the Globe. It wasn't just reflecting England, it wasn't just reflecting London or Britain. It was meant to represent everyone. His characters come from Italy, from Britain, they come from France, they come from Africa. Shakespeare is a truly international writer, writing internationally. He may not have known a great deal about the world at the time he was writing, but he was trying to speak for all of it. Shakespeare's plays, often, a lot of his words are put into a specific verse structure, which we call the iambic pentameter. That sounds very complicated. It isn't. Iambic just means that it's got two beats in it that are ostensibly I am, with the stress on the second part, I am. But they are in a pentameter. That's a 5-foot line. So in each line of the verse, it goes I am, I am, I am, I am, I am. It's very simple. It's rather like any form of poetry or beat or song. But if you observe it, so for example, to be or not to be, that is the question. If you observe the iambic, the meaning becomes clearer. Obviously in speaking you don't say to be or not to be, but the knowledge of that, and by paying attention to that, when you come to speak it, the meaning becomes clearer. To be or not to be, that is the question. You're leading to the final line. And when you say it and give yourself over to Shakespeare, when you get out of the way, you stop trying to make sense of it, and you stop trying to explain it to people. If you just give in to it, the line plays through you and sings and becomes clearer. All you actually need to do with Shakespeare is sit and just receive it. Just like when we watch films from America, where you might be watching a sort of film about the police in some inner city in America, and everybody talks very quickly and you can't quite follow all the lingo, but you don't worry. You just watch the scene. You'll find that you pick up quite a lot of it. Another interesting thing about Shakespeare is it's been argued that he often uses two words, like pomp and circumstance. There's an expression from Shakespeare that's entered the English language. Pomp and circumstance has two words basically explaining the same thing with a very slight difference. And it's been argued that Shakespeare was writing not only for a heightened courtly audience, he was also writing for a more simple audience of journeymen, and he was writing for everybody in Elizabethan society, so he also used quite common words that were more easily understood, and that way he made everybody understand. So I think even at Shakespeare's time, he understood that not everybody was understanding everything at every given moment, but the general sense comes over you. We know that it would appear that he invented a lot of words. It's debatable how many of the words he invented and how many of the words are just the first time we see them written down. But he obviously had confidence to be introducing new words to his audience because they were ready to try and understand. Well, the plot of The Tempest, on the face of it, is quite simple. A group of people have been stranded on an island by a magician. But he's basically debating whether or not to take revenge on them. And instead is learning that he needs to forgive and show mercy. But that's true of the other characters. Caliban feels wronged by Prospero. He wants to have Prospero killed. He wants to take the island back. But he too needs to learn that actually forgiveness and mercy is the better road. We also get an opportunity to see Prospero as a parent, because for the Elizabethans, of course, a king was a kind of parent. So Prospero's daughter, Miranda, is important, but also too Caliban, who is in a way Prospero's son. We get to see how a bad parent produces a bad son, and we get to see that dynamic play out. So there's lots of different forms of interest, lots of different things that we can see. Caliban is a very interesting part in that he's described by all the other characters in the play in so many different ways. He's a monster, he's a demi-devil, he's a fish, he's a moon calf, he's deformed. A lot of these things are contradictory. How can he be a devil and a fish and a moon calf and a deformed human? I think for an Elizabethan mind, Caliban would have struck them as being a devil. As I say, he has all the vices, greed, wrath, lust, all the really bad things that people think drive them. Caliban has. But he's also kept human by Shakespeare. He doesn't have any magic. He clearly is in love with Miranda, desperately in love, but's been rejected by her and by Prospero. So his fury is coming from a place of love too. So that's how I started, was not wanting to rule anything out, but try and keep everything in. So then you find a design that suits that, and then you try also to do a realistic, naturalistic thing, which is to imagine what it's like to be someone who was deserted on an island as a baby. His mother dies before Prospero finds him, and he's been left as a small child on an island surrounded by wild animals. So there's a lot of complicated, interesting things that you can do psychologically, from research and through design. I have a 10-year-old son. In fact, I have two sons, a 10 and a 7-year-old. My 10-year-old has been coming and seeing Shakespeare since he was 5. He saw All's Well That Ends Well when he was about 5 and a half. And he's never been frightened of it. And he has now seen 8 or so different Shakespeare plays, but because he was never told to worry about it, he's always understood it. I find it extraordinary. He, on his own, learnt to be or not to be one afternoon just because he wanted to, and that's thrilling. I have another son who's 7. He likes doing. He likes playing. He's not interested in sitting still and watching. And when he's come to the theatre, he's been bored rigid. And I completely understand both attitudes. I hate being in the theatre and watching. I love being in the theatre and playing. But I'm delighted that one of my sons can listen to the language and not be frightened by it. So, Shakespeare is not something that anyone should feel they have to like or have to sit and watch. It's something you can come and go from.